The Black Watch was the oldest of the Highland regiments, with a proud tradition within the British Army. First formed in 1725 to watch over the unruly Highlands for the government, and disbanded in 2006, where it amalgamated into the Royal Regiment of Scotland. Many men who joined the watch in the early days would do so in the strict understanding they only served in the Highlands amongst their own people who spoke their language. They wore a dark green tartan, which looked black from a distance, hence the name the Black Watch. In 1739, the watch became the 43rd Regiment of Foot, and was first mustered under its new title on the banks of the River Tay at Aberfeldy, and there's a fine monument to celebrate this occasion. In 1743, the Black Watch were ordered to march to Musselburgh, where they were to be reviewed on Musselburgh links by General Clayton. The Highlanders would not be happy about having to leave their mountains. They arrived in Musselburgh and were told that General Clayton was waiting for them just across the border at Berwick-upon-Tweed. At Berwick, they were told a great honour had bestowed the regiment, for now they were to march to London, where the King himself would carry out the review. These Highlanders were sullen and moody as they marched south, not happy at all at having to enter England. On the journey, they bumped into a party of Royal Scots who were returning north to Scotland to recruit more men. These Lowland soldiers told the Highlanders that they had heard after the King had reviewed the Black Watch, the watch were to be sent to serve in the Caribbean, but not the officers. The officers were returned to the Highlands to recruit more men. These private soldiers were now convinced they'd been betrayed by their own officers. They were now openly hostile as they continued the march towards London. They camped on Finchley Common, just north of the city. They were told that the King was away fighting the French in Flanders, so General Wade would carry out the review instead. 40,000 Londoners turned up to watch this. As General Wade walked up into the lines of soldiers, some in the crowd shouted that after the review, the watch were to be sold as slaves and sent to the Jamaicas. This unnerved many of the men, and that night in their camp they discussed this, and just over 100 decided to head back home.
Explore Castle Menzies after dark.
Is it really haunted?
Is it really haunted?
Book now to find out.
If you dare.
And they slipped out of the camp under cover of darkness and made their way north. When the English newspapers heard of this, they printed terror stories of not 100 Highlanders heading back to their families, but of over 1,000 savages pillaging and raping their way back to Scotland. The English were terrified, but these men simply disappeared. They weren't seen or heard of again until a farmer was ploughing his field near Peterborough when he was approached by a soldier wearing a red jacket and dark tartan. This soldier asked the farmer politely in broken English if he could go and fetch the local justice of the peace, a man called John Creed. Creed stayed in this house in the town of Oundle near Peterborough. Creed was taken to the field where he was introduced to this soldier, who then took him to a nearby wood, the Lady Wood. In the wood, Creed was introduced to two corporals, both Macphersons, who Creed would later say were in charge. These two soldiers told Creed they would surrender if they received a pardon from the King. Creed explained he could not guarantee this, but would try his hardest. He then left the wood, noting that the soldiers in the trees had plenty of ammunition and food and were well dug in. Creed informed the authorities. Soon the wood was surrounded by dragoons. An officer in the cavalry, fearing a bloodbath, entered the wood and persuaded the Highlanders to surrender. Each man was clamped in chains, locked up, tried and found guilty of mutiny, and sentenced to death. But King George commuted all but 3. The men who were spared were sent to the Caribbean as punishment. The 3 men still sentenced to death were the 2 Macpherson corporals, Samuel and Malcolm Macpherson, and another man called Farquhar Shaw. Shaw had refused to surrender in the woods. He had also pointed his bayonet at one of his sergeants in Finchley Common. He was found lying exhausted in a ditch 60 miles north of Peterborough. These 3 men were locked up in the Tower of London, and then one cold morning they were taken from their cell, lined up against a wall in front of the whole regiment, and shot by a firing squad. The rest of the men who were not involved in the mutiny were sent to fight the French in Flanders. And during the Battle of Fontenoy in 1745, the Black Watch charge was so fierce that a French officer referred to the regiment as Highland Furies, and it was just under 200 years later when the Germans, fighting the kilted Highlanders in the battlefields in western France, referred to them as the Ladies from Hell. It's interesting that 2 years after the Black Watch mutiny, Bonnie Prince Charlie's Jacobite army had invaded England. It advanced as far south as Derby, before turning back and retreating to Scotland due to a lack of English Jacobite support. The government were short of troops. One of the best regiments available at the time was the Black Watch, but they were kept on the south coast of England because it was feared that if the Black Watch came face to face with the Jacobites, then the Black Watch would defect to Bonnie Prince Charlie's side. If you go to the Tower of London, there's a brand new memorial to the people who have been executed within the tower, and it's full of the great and good of English history: Anne Boleyn, Lady Jane Grey, Walter Raleigh, but also amongst the names are these 3 soldiers: Samuel Macpherson, Malcolm Macpherson, and Farquhar Shaw. Another interesting story is if you go to Aberfeldy and you see the monument to the Black Watch, the figure of a Highlander at the top of the monument, his features are said to be the features of the executed Farquhar Shaw. I have got a soft spot for the Black Watch, as my great-granddad served with the watch in the First World War, fighting in the Battle of the Somme in 1916. If anybody's interested in the regiment's history, I would recommend you visit the Black Watch Museum at Balhousie Castle in Perth. It's a wonderful exhibition with lots of interesting artefacts and well worth a visit. If you've enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe. You might like to take one of our dark history tours, ghost tours, or paranormal investigations that are held in Perthshire, Glasgow and Stirling. If so, please visit our website, which is www.historyandhorrortours.com. Thank you.